A 10-year-old boy says something feels strange down there, and when his mother checks, she freezes, her heart sinking as she uncovers a terrifying. What could cause such horror in an innocent child? Share your thoughts below and follow the story for the shocking revelation. Mom. Alex's voice cracked as he hovered at the edge of the room, his face twisted in discomfort, hands clenching the fabric of his shorts. Severina, feeling a slight unease but brushing it off, glanced over from where she was prepping dinner. "What is it, sweetie?" she asked, casually wiping her hands on her apron and walking toward him. Alex didn't meet her gaze. His face was flushed, but his eyes were wide with something she hadn't expected: embarrassment. "Something's wrong with me, Mom. Really wrong." He hesitated, then blurted, "I don't know what's happening, but it feels weird." Severina raised an eyebrow, the casualness in her tone unwavering. "Weird how? Did you hurt yourself?" "No." Alex fidgeted, clearly uncomfortable. It's down there," he muttered, pointing awkwardly toward his pants. Severina followed his gesture, her eyes dropping to his shorts. And then she saw it, a noticeable bulge. For a moment she froze, but her reaction was far from panic. Instead, she stifled a chuckle and shook her head lightly, her motherly instincts kicking in. "Oh, Alex, it's nothing to worry about. It happens to boys your age. It's just something normal." "But Mum, it won't stop." Alex's voice raised a notch, the panic clear as he shifted uncomfortably. "It's been like this, and I don't know why." His small fists clenched at his sides, his frustration growing. Severina, still calm, knelt down and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sweetie, listen to me. It's going to go away. Your body is just changing a little, that's all. It's not a big deal." Alex didn't look convinced. "But I feel weird. I'm not normal, am I?" His voice wavered, uncertainty and fear swirling in his wide eyes. She sighed softly, smoothing his hair back. "Alex, sweetheart, you're fine. This is completely normal for boys your age. It'll go away soon, I promise." She gave him a reassuring smile, not wanting to make a bigger deal of it than it was. Alex wasn't so easily convinced. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at her, still fidgeting. "But what if it doesn't?" "It will," Severina insisted gently, pulling him into a hug. "Just take a few deep breaths. I know it's uncomfortable, but it'll pass. You're not a freak or anything, okay?" Alex remained quiet in her arms, still tense, but slightly soothed by her words. Severina felt him settle, though she could tell he was far from calm. Later that evening, after Alex had fallen asleep, Severina sat at the kitchen table, sipping her tea when Michael, her husband, walked through the door. He tossed his jacket onto a chair and stretched, his broad shoulders filling the room. "Long day?" she asked casually, still stirring her cup, though a part of her mind drifted back to Alex's earlier distress. Michael grunted, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "You have no idea. What's going on here?" "Alex?" she began, not wanting to make a big deal out of it, but needing to share nonetheless. He was upset earlier. Said something's going on with his body." Michael raised an eyebrow, looking more curious than concerned. "Yeah? What's that supposed to mean?" Severina waved her hand dismissively. "You know, boys his age. Things start happening. He was just a bit freaked out because, well, he didn't understand it." "Ah, I see. Typical." Michael leaned back against the counter, his face softening with amusement. "I remember when it started happening to me. Poor kid probably doesn't know what to do with himself." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Did you explain it?" "Of course. Severina replied, not wanting to admit that part of her had brushed it off too easily. I told him it's normal. It's no big deal. Michael shrugged. It's not. He'll get used to it. Happens to all of us. He cracked open the beer, taking a long sip. You probably over-explained it, didn't you? Severina laughed lightly, the tension easing out of her shoulders. No, I kept it simple. Just reassured him. Michael smiled, leaning over to give her a quick kiss on the forehead. That's my girl. Don't let him freak you out. It's part of growing up. He turned and headed towards the living room, flicking on the TV. Severina smiled after him, though a faint worry still lingered. She knew she hadn't overreacted, at least not this time. But something about Alex's fear stuck with her. She told herself that everything was fine, just as she had reassured him earlier. Still, she couldn't shake the image of his wide, anxious eyes as he stood in front of her. Just hormones, she whispered to herself, almost as if needing to hear it aloud. It'll pass. And yet, as the night wore on and she lay beside Michael in bed, a faint unease tugged at the back of her mind. Alex's voice echoed in her head, the slight tremble as he had asked if he was normal. The following morning, Severina awoke with a dull ache in her chest. Michael's side of the bed was already cold. He'd left early, as usual. She stretched, trying to shake off the unease that had settled deep in her bones the night before. But it lingered, like a shadow that refused to disappear with the dawn. Just hormones, she whispered again to herself, a mantra she was beginning to doubt more with each passing day. Alex had been quieter than usual, retreating into himself more often, avoiding eye contact and the usual joy he once had when bounding down the stairs for breakfast. As she made her way to his room, a knot of dread twisted in her stomach. "Alex?" she called softly, opening the door. Her heart dropped when she saw him sitting on the edge of his bed, his head hanging low, hands clenched tightly on his lap. He didn't even look up when she entered. "Hey, mijo, breakfast is ready. You okay?" Severina sat down next to him, placing a hand gently on his back. The stiffness in his posture told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't fine. Something was eating away at him, and she was running out of reassurances. Alex's voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, it won't stop." Severina felt the familiar pang of guilt and worry ripple through her, but she forced a smile. "It's just your body. It's still adjusting, Alex. It'll go away soon." Days passed and Alex's condition didn't improve. In fact, it seemed to worsen. There were moments when she would glance at him, standing awkwardly in the kitchen or sitting on the couch, and notice the tension in his body. The bulge in his pants had become more pronounced, visible even through his loose-fitting clothes. He tried to hide it, but it was impossible. His friends stopped coming over to play, and the laughter that used to echo through the house was replaced with silence. The boy, who used to fill the home with energy, now walked around like a ghost. Severina's worry grew with each day. She had tried to convince herself that it was all normal: puberty, hormones, growing pains. But deep down, she knew this wasn't normal. The look in Alex's eyes whenever he caught her staring, the shame that clouded his face, no 10-year-old should have to feel that. The worst part was the uncertainty. She didn't know what to do, how to help him, or if this was something that would eventually just stop on its own. Every night as she lay in bed next to Michael, her mind spun with questions. What if there's something wrong with him? What if this doesn't go away? What am I supposed to do? Alex had stopped playing with the neighborhood kids altogether. He would come home from school, toss his bag into the corner, and go straight to his room. It broke her heart to see him so withdrawn. so unlike the carefree boy he had once been. And worse, it wasn't just Alex who was acting differently. The neighbors had begun to notice too. Severina could feel the weight of their stares as she walked through the village. The whispers followed her wherever she went, people pausing mid-conversation when she passed by. It wasn't long before the gossip started to spread like wildfire. Everyone knew about Alex, about the strange boy who no longer played outside. One afternoon, Severina was walking home from the market when she heard it. "Have you heard about her son?" One of the neighborhood women whispered to her friend, her voice dripping with disgust. "That poor boy. Always walking around with... You know what? It's unnatural." No, Severina's stomach twisted as she kept walking, pretending not to hear. "I've seen it myself," the other woman replied in a hushed voice. "He's always got that bulge in his pants. What kind of boy is that? I don't want my kids anywhere near him. There's something wrong with him, I tell you." "And that mother," the first woman spat. "She's not doing anything about it. She just lets him walk around like that. She's as bad as he is. I wouldn't be surprised if she's the reason he's so dark, so twisted." Severina felt her breath catch in her throat. The cruelty of their words hit her like a slap. She clenched her fists around the grocery bags, willing herself to keep moving, to not turn around and confront them. But the words stung, each one a sharp needle of judgment piercing through her. As she walked further, another voice joined in. "Can you imagine? So young and already like that? Who knows what he'll turn into when he's older? I wouldn't let my kids play with him either." Severina's face burned with shame. "My Alex isn't like that," she told herself, though their words had already rooted a seed of doubt deep inside her. She tried to ignore them, tried to block out the vicious gossip, but the truth was, she was scared too. She heard another voice, a sharp one, cut through the murmurs. "Shame on you all." It was the old woman from across the street, the one who rarely spoke but never tolerated nonsense. "Do you have nothing better to do than gossip about a child? How dare you talk about him that way?" The women fell silent, though Severina could still feel their judgment hanging in the air. The old woman shook her head in disgust before turning her back on the group, muttering to herself. Severina finally reached her front door, her hands shaking as she fumbled with the keys. She hurried inside, leaning against the closed door, her heart racing. Days passed, but the feeling of unease lingered like a storm waiting to break. Alex was quieter, more withdrawn. He stopped asking to go outside, and every time Severina glanced at him, sitting alone at the table, his eyes lowered to his lap, she felt the knot in her stomach tighten. Something wasn't right. Desperate for answers, Severina finally made the decision to take Alex to the village doctor. Her hope rested on someone with more knowledge, someone who could tell her what to do. The air was still and heavy as Severina guided Alex into the small, dimly lit clinic. "Please, doctor," she whispered, her voice barely holding back the flood of emotions. "Something's wrong with him. I need to know what's happening to my son." The doctor, a kind-faced man with thinning hair and a serious expression, nodded slowly. "Take a seat, Severina," he said in a calm voice. "Let's see what's going on with Alex." Alex sat quietly, his small body rigid as the doctor examined him. Severina's eyes never left her son, watching every move of the doctor's hands, every furrow in his brow, hoping for some kind of sign, some reassurance. The silence in the room was suffocating, and her heart pounded as the minutes stretched on. The doctor finally straightened, glancing back at Severina. "We'll need to run some tests, just to be sure," he said softly. But so far, nothing seems out of the ordinary physically. I'm going to order some blood work and other scans to check everything." Severina felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the overwhelming sense of helplessness. Tests. More waiting. She wrapped her arms around Alex, pulling him close as the doctor wrote down a prescription. "In the meantime," he continued, "I'm going to give him some medication to lower his blood pressure. It's unusually high for a boy his age, and we need to bring that down." High blood pressure. Another mystery in the growing list of things Severina didn't understand. "Will this help him?" she asked, her voice tight with anxiety. "Hopefully," the doctor replied, his tone far from confident. "It might just be a temporary thing. Let's see how he responds in the next few days." Severina nodded, clutching the prescription as though it held the key to Alex's recovery. She thanked the doctor and led her son out of the clinic, her mind racing, unable to shake the feeling that they were still far from finding an answer. Over the next few days, Severina watched Alex closely. The medication seemed to help, at least for now. He played more, his energy returning in small bursts. Sometimes she would catch him laughing at the television or smiling faintly while he built towers with his blocks. But even in those fleeting moments of normalcy, Severina couldn't shake the nagging sense of dread that lingered beneath the surface. It wasn't enough. "How's my little man doing?" Lauren asked one morning, stepping into the house with her usual bright smile. Severina had been relying more on her friend to help with Alex while she worked, grateful for the extra support. Lauren had been her best friend since they were children, their bond stretching back to days of playing in the village together. Now, as adults, she was the only person Severina truly trusted with her son. "Better, I think," Severina said, forcing a smile. "The doctor gave him some medicine, and it seems to be helping." Lauren raised an eyebrow, her smile faltering slightly. "Seems to be." Severina sighed, wiping her hands on the dish towel. "I don't know, Lauren. I just have this feeling. Like it's not really over. Like it's just waiting." Lauren didn't say anything at first, but her eyes softened. "He'll get through it, Sev. He's strong. And you're doing everything you can." Severina nodded, but her heart wasn't in it. She couldn't escape the uneasy feeling that this was far from the end of Alex's struggles. But when Lauren left that afternoon, she convinced herself things would continue to improve. That night, however, everything changed. Alex came to her room after dinner, his face pale and his body trembling. He clutched at his pajama pants, eyes wide with terror. "Mum, it's happening again!" His voice was strained, filled with panic. Severina rushed to his side, kneeling down to comfort him. "What is it, sweetheart? What's wrong?" Alex's hands trembled as he pointed to the bulge in his pants. "It won't stop, Mom. I thought it was going away, but it's worse now. What's wrong with me?" Severina's heart sank. She thought they had turned a corner, that the medication was helping. But now, looking at Alex's terrified face, she realized that whatever had been happening was far from over. It had returned, fiercer than before. "It's okay, Alex," she whispered, trying to soothe him though her mind raced with fear. "We'll figure it out. You're going to be okay." But Alex shook his head violently. "No, Mom. I don't want to be a freak. I don't want to be like this." His words struck her like a physical blow. A freak. The very word she had tried to protect him from hearing now echoed in her own home. She pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly as he sobbed against her chest. "You're not a freak, Alex. You're not. We'll fix this, I promise." But as she held him, Severina couldn't ignore the rising sense of dread. Alex had seemed fine earlier in the day, playing with Lauren, watching over him. Now, just hours after her friend's visit, he had spiraled into panic again. As the night wore on and Alex finally fell into a fitful sleep, Severina sat on the edge of his bed, her mind swirling with confusion and fear. The next day, Alex refused to leave his room. Severina had begged him to go outside to get some fresh air, but he just shook his head, his face twisted with shame. "They'll make fun of me again," he muttered, barely able to meet her eyes. Severina's heart ached as she sat beside him on the bed. "Who? Alex? Who's been saying things?" "The kids at school," Alex whispered, his voice strained. They saw it. They said I'm gross, that I'm a freak." His words hung in the air, echoing through Severina's mind. She had always feared that the other children would notice Alex's strange condition, but hearing it from him, hearing the pain and humiliation in his voice, was almost too much to bear. "They're just kids, Alex," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "They don't understand. You're not a freak, okay? We'll figure this out." But Alex only shook his head. "They don't want to play with me anymore. They won't even look at me. It's like I'm dirty." Severina fought back tears, pulling Alex into a tight hug. "You're not dirty. You're my boy, and we'll get through this." But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure she believed them anymore. That afternoon, Lauren showed up at the house, her usual bright smile in place. "How's my favorite little guy doing?" she asked, stepping into the kitchen where Severina stood washing dishes. Severina forced a smile, trying to hide the unease that had settled in her chest. "He's not doing so well today. He won't leave his room." Lauren frowned, setting down the bag of groceries she had brought with her. "Again? Poor thing. What's going on?" Severina hesitated, the doubt she'd been feeling gnawing at her. "He said the kids at school were making fun of him. They noticed. His condition." Lauren's eyes widened, and for a moment Severina saw something flicker in her expression, something she couldn't quite place. But then Lauren nodded, her face softening again. "Kids can be cruel," she said, shaking her head. "It's a shame. He's such a sweet boy." A heavy silence filled the room as Severina dried her hands on a towel, her mind racing. She opened her mouth to say something, to ask the question that had been nagging at her since last night. But Lauren spoke first. "You know," Lauren said, her voice low, "I've been thinking maybe you should try something different. Something outside of what the doctors are doing." Severina's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Lauren leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There's someone in town, Agatha. She's an old healer, knows things the doctors don't. People go to her when nothing else works. I've heard she's helped with problems like this before." Severina stared at her, unsure of what to think. "Agatha?" she repeated. "I've heard of her, but I don't know, she's not exactly a doctor." Lauren waved a hand dismissively. "Doctors haven't been able to help Alex, have they? Maybe it's time to try something else. What's the harm?" Severina hesitated. The very idea of going to someone like Agatha, a woman surrounded by rumors of strange powers and mysticism, made her uneasy. But at the same time, Lauren was right. The doctors hadn't been able to help. Nothing had worked. And Alex's condition wasn't getting better. "I'll think about it," Severina said finally, though her mind was already churning with possibilities. Lauren smiled, her eyes glinting with something Severina couldn't quite read. "It's worth a shot, Sev. Sometimes it takes a different kind of help to solve a problem like this." As Lauren left the house that evening, Severina sat at the kitchen table, her thoughts swirling. She glanced toward Alex's room, where he sat alone, still refusing to come out. Could Agatha really help him? Or was there something far more dangerous lurking just beneath the surface of their lives? Severina sat at the kitchen table long after Lauren had left, the darkness outside creeping in like a slow fog, swallowing the daylight and leaving her alone with her thoughts. The chill in the air seemed to have settled deep in her bones, and no amount of tea or warmth from the stove could chase it away. She couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had taken root in her mind, the whisper of doubt that had grown louder with each passing day. What if this wasn't just a medical issue? What if Lauren was right about seeking other forms of help? The thought of going to Agatha, the village's mysterious healer, had always unsettled Severina. The old woman lived at the edge of town, in a small, shadowy house that seemed forgotten by time. People only spoke of her in hushed tones, and rumors surrounded her like a fog. Some said she was a powerful healer, others whispered that her powers were dark, unnatural. Severina had always been skeptical of such things, but now, with Alex's condition worsening, she was desperate. The following morning, after a long and sleepless night, Severina made her decision. Agatha's house stood at the edge of the village, half hidden behind a thick veil of trees that seemed to whisper as Severina approached. The air around the house was thick, and a strange scent, herbs mixed with something unfamiliar, hung in the air. Alex walked silently beside her, his small hand gripping hers tightly. He hadn't spoken much since his last episode, and his eyes held a permanent cloud of confusion and fear. Severina hesitated at the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The house seemed alive, the dark wood groaning as the wind pushed against it. A creeping sense of dread crawled up her spine, but she steeled herself. This is for Alex. She knocked. The door creaked open almost immediately, revealing a small, hunched woman draped in layers of shawls. Her eyes were sharp, piercing through the gloom like twin flames. "You've come," Agatha said, her voice raspy but firm, as though she had been expecting them. "Bring the boy inside." Severina felt her stomach twist with unease, but she nodded, gently pulling Alex into the house. The interior was dim, the air thick with the smell of burning herbs and something else she couldn't place. Strange objects hung from the ceiling, bundles of dried flowers, small bones tied together with string, and jars filled with mysterious liquids lined the shelves. Agatha led them to a small room at the back of the house, where a large, circular table stood in the center. At its edges were candles, each flickering with a pale, almost ghostly light. "Sit," Agatha commanded, gesturing to the chairs around the table. Severina obeyed, pulling Alex close to her as they sat. For several long moments, Agatha stared at Alex, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. Her hands, thin and veined, hovered over his head, not quite touching him, but close enough that Severina could feel the tension in the air. "Your boy," Agatha finally said, her voice low, "is not sick in the way you think." Severina's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" "There is something attached to him," Agatha continued, her fingers moving in the air as though tracing invisible lines around Alex. "A presence, a darkness. It clings to him, feeding off his fear, growing stronger every day." Severina's heart pounded. What kind of presence? Agatha's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Severina saw a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, or recognition. "It is Lilith," she whispered, the name sending a chill down Severina's spine. An ancient spirit, a demon, if you will. She's found your son and claimed him, and she will not let go easily. Severina felt the room spin. But why? Why, Alex? Agatha shook her head. It is not about why. Spirits like Lilith do not need reasons. They see something vulnerable, something they can manipulate, and they take it. Severina swallowed hard, her hands gripping Alex's shoulders tightly. What do we do? How do we get rid of her? There is a ritual, Agatha said, her voice grave. It is dangerous, but it may be the only way. I must sever the connection between Lilith and your son. Severina's throat was dry. She glanced at Alex, his face pale and frightened. Is it safe? Agatha's eyes flickered. Nothing about dealing with spirits is ever safe. The ritual began as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. Agatha moved with practiced precision, lighting candles and muttering words in a language Severina didn't understand. The air grew thick with smoke as she burned herbs and strange plants in a small iron pot, the scent heavy and intoxicating. Alex sat at the center of the circle Agatha had drawn on the floor, his eyes wide with fear, but his body still. Severina knelt beside him, holding his hand tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. You must stay calm, Agatha instructed, her voice low and commanding. No matter what happens, do not break the circle. Severina nodded, her grip on Alex tightening. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of something unseen pressing down on them. Agatha began to chant, her voice rising and falling in a rhythmic cadence. The smoke swirled around them, thick and heavy, until it felt as though the room itself was closing in. Alex whimpered, his small body trembling beside her. Mom, he whispered, his voice shaky. I'm scared. Severina leaned in, her lips close to his ear. It's okay, baby. I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you. But even as she said the words, a cold fear gripped her heart. The smoke twisted and curled, and for a brief, terrifying moment. Hours later, after the ritual had ended, Severina led Alex out of Agatha's house, her legs weak, her mind spinning. Agatha had said the ritual had been successful, that Lilith had been banished. But as Severina looked at Alex's pale face, the shadow still lingering in his eyes, she wasn't sure if she believed her. The wind howled softly outside, a haunting reminder of the ritual that had taken place only days ago. Severina couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease that had settled into the very walls of their home. The cold had seeped in, despite her attempts to warm the house with the usual comforts, cooking, cleaning, keeping everything in order. But the ritual hadn't brought the peace she'd hoped for. If anything, it seemed to have invited more questions, more shadows. Alex's condition had not improved. Each morning, Severina watched him carefully, noticing the odd pattern emerging. Some days he appeared almost normal, his demeanor calm, his body relaxed. But on others, the same troubling problem returned, his body betraying him in ways no child should experience. His member, rigid and unnatural, standing out in stark contrast to the innocence of his age. Severina was at a loss. How could this still be happening? The rituals, the medicines, the desperate prayers, all had been for nothing. The uncertainty gnawed at her, wrapping its cold fingers around her heart. Was there something Alex was doing during the day that caused this? Something he wasn't telling her? She had asked him, of course. Quietly at first, then more firmly as her frustration grew. But Alex's eyes would always drop to the floor, his lips tight, offering no answers. His silence only deepened her fear, as if some dark secret lay just beyond her reach. Severina spent hours pacing their home, her mind racing. No one had any answers. The doctors spoke in circles, offering only platitudes. And Agatha? The ritual had been intense, but nothing had changed. Desperation crept into Severina's thoughts. She had to find out what was happening to her son, even if it meant uncovering a truth she wasn't ready to face. That's when the idea came to her. Cameras. She'd overheard someone at the market talking about installing cameras for security. If she set up cameras in the house, she could finally see what was happening, if anything was happening, when she wasn't around. Severina wasn't sure what she expected to find, but deep down, she hoped it would give her the answers she craved. Without telling Michael, who had become increasingly distant and uninterested in their son's condition, she purchased the equipment and discreetly installed cameras in key areas of the house. Alex's room, the living room, the hallway. It was her last hope. She couldn't turn to Michael for support. He had brushed off every concern she raised, leaving her to navigate this nightmare alone. He didn't want to hear another word about Alex or his struggles. To him, it was as though Alex's suffering didn't exist. Each day, after returning from work, Severina would rush to check the footage, desperate for a clue, a lead, anything that might explain why Alex's condition persisted. But for days, nothing out of the ordinary appeared. The recordings were mundane, Alex moving about the house, eating, watching television, retreating to his room. Nothing strange, nothing alarming. Until one night when she saw something that stopped her heart. It was late, nearly midnight, and Severina was hunched over the small monitor, her eyes scanning through hours of footage, when she noticed a shadow in the background of one of the recordings. At first, it was barely visible, a flicker in the corner of the screen. But as she watched more closely, the figure became clearer, ominous and unsettling. Her breath caught in her throat as she leaned closer, her heart hammering in her chest. She could see Michael, arriving home earlier than usual. He moved quietly, sneaking into their bedroom, where he opened the drawer of his nightstand. From it, he pulled out a small bottle of pills, Viagra. Severina's pulse quickened as she watched, her mind struggling to comprehend what was unfolding in front of her. Why was he taking those pills? Her thoughts spiraled as she continued watching. Then came the moment that shattered everything she thought she knew. Michael found Lauren in the hallway, and without a word, the two of them disappeared into one of the bedrooms. The camera captured enough. A door left slightly ajar, muffled whispers, and then the unmistakable sound of betrayal. Severina's hand flew to her mouth, her heart breaking as she realized what she was seeing. Lauren, her best friend. She had trusted her. They had shared everything since childhood, and now, this. But the horror didn't end there. In the next frame, Alex appeared. The boy stood just outside the door, watching, his innocent eyes wide as he peered through the crack in the door, witnessing the unimaginable. Severina's stomach twisted, nausea rising in her throat. Alex had seen everything. The betrayal, the deceit, all of it. She watched in silence, unable to tear her eyes away from the screen, as Alex slowly approached the room after Michael and Lauren had left. He crept into the darkness, where the pill bottle still lay on the bedside table. And then, just like Michael, Alex took one of the small blue pills. In that moment, the truth crashed over Severina like a wave, its weight suffocating her. Alex had been imitating Michael. He had seen his stepfather's actions and, in his childlike innocence, copied them, unknowingly putting himself in harm's way. The rigidness of his body, the strange and dangerous effects. It was all because of those pills. Tears streamed down Severina's face as she sat frozen in front of the monitor, her mind a whirlwind of rage, betrayal, and despair. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place, but the revelation brought no comfort, only pain. only heartbreak, her husband, her best friend, her son. The web of lies had finally unraveled, and Severina was left standing in the wreckage of her life, wondering how she would ever put the pieces back together. Severina's hands shook as she turned off the video. The images played over and over in her mind like a haunting nightmare she couldn't escape. The betrayal, so raw and vivid, burned through her. Michael, Lauren, her best friend, her husband, and worst of all, Alex, the little boy who had been dragged into their lies, unknowingly caught in the middle of their twisted, selfish games. She could feel the anger rising, a tidal wave of fury building inside her chest, but beneath it all was a profound sense of devastation. How could this have happened? How had she been so blind? But there was no time to dwell on her own guilt. There was something more urgent she had to do now, her hands clenched into fists. The house was eerily quiet when Michael returned that evening, the soft creak of the door louder than usual as he stepped inside. Severina was waiting for him, sitting at the dining table with the laptop in front of her, its cold blue light casting long shadows across the room. Her face was expressionless, a mask of calm hiding the storm that churned inside her. "Severina?" Michael called out, his voice casual as he set his keys down on the counter. "What are you doing up this late?" Her silence was like a lead weight in the air, thick and suffocating. She didn't turn to face him right away. Instead, she clicked a button on the laptop, and the screen lit up with the frozen image from the video, the unmistakable scene of Michael and Lauren entangled in each other's arms. The sound of the video playing made Michael freeze. His casual air disappeared in an instant. He turned slowly, his face draining of color as he saw what was on the screen. Severina's voice was ice when she finally spoke. "Watch." Michael took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching for the chair behind him to steady himself. "Severina, listen. Watch," she repeated, her voice shaking slightly, but the anger still firm beneath it. Reluctantly, Michael's eyes turned to the screen. His face paled even more as he watched himself. The betrayal he thought he had hidden so well playing out before him. Lauren, the affair, Alex's innocent face appearing at the doorway. It was all there, caught on tape. The evidence was undeniable. When the video ended, the silence was deafening. Severina's eyes burned into Michael's, waiting for him to speak. "Severina, I can explain," he stammered, his voice breaking. "It wasn't what it looked like. I mean, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen this way." "A mistake?" Severina's voice was low, dangerous. "A mistake that happened how many times? With my best friend under my roof while my son watched you?" Michael flinched at her words. "Please, Severina, just listen." "No!" Severina slammed her fist onto the table, her voice breaking through the calm facade she had tried to maintain. "You've been lying to me. You've been sneaking around with her and Alex. He saw everything. Do you even understand what you've done to him?" Michael's face crumpled, guilt and fear creeping into his expression. "I swear, it was just a stupid mistake, Severina. I love you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Severina stood up, her body trembling with rage. "Love? Love doesn't do this. Love doesn't betray. It doesn't destroy families. You ruined everything, Michael. You betrayed me. You betrayed Alex. Get out. I never want to see you again." Michael's eyes widened in panic. "No, Severina, don't. Please, we can fix this. I'll end it with Lauren, I swear. Get out." Severina's voice rang through the house, louder and fiercer than it had ever been. Her patience, her tolerance, had snapped. There was no more room for explanations, no more space for excuses. Michael knew in that moment that it was over. There was no saving this, no salvaging the mess he had created. With his head hung low, he grabbed his coat and his keys, leaving the house without another word. As the door slammed shut, Severina stood still, her breath coming in short gasps. She felt Alex's presence behind her, and when she turned, she saw her son standing at the edge of the hallway, his small frame shrouded in the dim light. "Mum?" Alex's voice was soft, confused. Is Dad leaving?" Severina's heart broke for the 100th time that night. She knelt down, pulling Alex into her arms. "Yes, baby, he's leaving, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I won't let anyone hurt you again, I promise." The next day, Severina knew what she had to do. Lauren needed to know that this betrayal would not go unanswered. She had invited Lauren over as usual, under the guise of needing help with something. But this time there was no warmth in her invitation, no friendship left to offer. When Lauren arrived, Severina didn't even greet her at the door. She waited in the living room, her eyes cold as Lauren stepped inside. "Hey, Sev." Lauren's voice was too bright, too cheerful for someone who had committed such a dark betrayal. "What's up?" Severina didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket, pulling out the small bottle of Viagra she had found in Michael's drawer. She tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her, watching as Lauren's eyes widened in shock. "Do you want to explain this?" Severina's voice was low, steady, but filled with an undercurrent of rage. Lauren froze, her face paling as she looked from the bottle to Severina's face. "Sev, don't lie to me." Severina's voice grew sharper, her eyes narrowing. "I know everything, Lauren. I know what you and Michael have been doing. I know how you've been sneaking around behind my back, and I know that Alex saw it all." Lauren took a step back, her face contorted with panic. "Severina, I swear, it wasn't. What? A mistake, just a fling. Do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed my family, Lauren, my son." Tears welled in Lauren's eyes, but Severina wasn't moved. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Lauren whispered, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry, Sev. Sorry?" Severina stood up, towering over her former friend. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't erase what Alex saw. It doesn't undo the damage you've caused." Lauren's breath hitched, and before Severina could say another word, she turned and fled from the house, leaving Severina standing alone in the silence. Severina watched the door close behind her, a strange calm settling over her now. The betrayal had broken her heart, shattered her trust. But now she could see clearly. Her path forward was painful, but it was one she had to take alone. Alex needed her, and that was all that mattered. No one would hurt him again, not if she could help it. Severina sat at the edge of Alex's bed, her fingers brushing through his hair as he lay staring up at the ceiling. The weight of the last few weeks hung between them, a silence that neither mother nor son knew how to break. The shadows from the curtains swayed gently in the dim room, casting soft shapes on the walls, like ghosts of memories they both wanted to forget. "Mom," Alex finally spoke, his voice hesitant, almost fearful. "Why did Dad take those pills?" Severina stiffened for a moment, the question hanging in the air like thick smoke. She had known this conversation was coming, but nothing could have prepared her for how painful it would feel to hear those words from her son's mouth. She had tried to shield him from the weight of what had happened, but Alex had seen everything. He deserved an answer. Taking a deep breath, She turned to him, her voice soft but firm. "Alex, sometimes adults make bad choices, things they shouldn't do. Your dad, what he did, it wasn't right." Alex furrowed his brow, clearly trying to understand. "But he took the pills, and I saw him with Lauren. Why would he do that?" Severina felt her heart break again. How could she explain the complexity of betrayal, of human weakness, to a boy so young, so innocent? She reached for his hand, holding it tightly. "What your dad did with Lauren was wrong, Alex, and taking those pills. That was his choice. But you have to know something, okay?" She squeezed his hand, hoping he would understand the seriousness of what she was about to say. "Just because grown-ups do something, it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do." Alex's wide, innocent eyes stared back at her, absorbing her words. "But I thought if Dad did it, it was okay." Severina shook her head gently. "No, sweetheart. Not everything adults do is right. People make mistakes, sometimes really bad ones. But that doesn't mean you should copy them." She paused, brushing a tear from his cheek as he looked away. "Those pills, they're dangerous. They hurt you, didn't they?" Alex nodded slowly, and Severina felt a surge of both relief and sorrow. He understood now, in his own way, that some things were too complicated for a child to bear. But there was still a long way to go in healing the wounds left by Michael's betrayal. She knew they had both lost something during this nightmare. "I'm sorry, Mum," Alex whispered. "I didn't know." "I know, baby," Severina said, pulling him into her arms. "None of this was your fault." Days turned into weeks, and slowly, life began to stitch itself back together. After Michael and Lauren were gone from their lives, the heavy atmosphere that had weighed down the house started to lift. It was as if the air itself had cleared, the darkness retreating and leaving room for light to come in. Severina poured all of her energy into Alex's recovery. She became more present than ever before, her every waking thought devoted to ensuring his happiness and well-being. They spent afternoons in the park, where Alex slowly began playing with the neighborhood kids again. His laughter, once buried beneath the weight of confusion and shame, began to surface, filling the air with a brightness that Severina hadn't heard in what felt like forever. The symptoms that had plagued Alex for so long, the unnatural stiffness in his body, the painful tension, gradually faded. It was as if his body was finally allowed to return to its natural rhythm, no longer under the grip of the destructive influence that had surrounded him. Severina watched with cautious joy as Alex began to thrive once more. She knew that the past would always leave scars, but to see her son smiling, running and playing without the shadow of Michael's mistakes looming over him was a victory she hadn't thought possible. Each day felt like a small miracle, a reminder that they had survived the storm. Severina often found herself reflecting on the journey they had endured, the weight of the betrayal, the desperation of the rituals, the sleepless nights spent wondering if Alex would ever be okay. It had all led them here, to this moment of fragile peace. And for that, she was grateful. But it wasn't just Alex who had changed. Severina felt something shift within herself too. She had come to understand that survival wasn't just about protecting her son from the world, but also about confronting her own fears and wounds. She had lost a part of herself in the chaos of it all. But what had emerged was someone stronger, more resilient, someone who knew how to fight for what mattered most. Months later, life had settled into a new kind of normal. Alex had returned to school, rejoining his friends without hesitation. The laughter, the games, they all came naturally again, as if the dark cloud of those months had finally passed. He had forgotten as children often do, the worst of what had happened. His mind was free to explore the world again without the weight of secrets. Severina, too, had found peace in the quiet moments. She no longer feared the long silences of the house, no longer looked over her shoulder expecting shadows from the past to creep in. The betrayal of Michael and Lauren was behind her, a wound that had healed, leaving only a faint scar. She had faced them, cast them out of her life, and reclaimed her home, her son, and her own sense of self. One evening, as Severina watched Alex running through the yard, chasing the last golden rays of the setting sun, she felt a sense of closure wash over her. They had both been through so much, more than anyone should ever have to endure, but here they were, alive, smiling, whole. "Mom," Alex called from the yard, his voice full of joy. "Look, I caught the ball." Severina smiled, her heart swelling with pride and love. "Good job, baby," she called back. In that moment, she realized something profound. The love she had for Alex, the care she had poured into him, was the force that had kept them both moving forward. It wasn't the rituals or the desperate attempts to fix what was broken. It was the quiet strength of a mother's love, the daily acts of kindness and patience that had rebuilt their lives. The storm had passed, and in its wake, Severina found herself reborn, stronger than ever. She knew that there would always be challenges, but together, she and Alex had proven that no darkness could ever truly consume them. They had survived, and now they would thrive. Hey guys, thanks for sticking with me through this intense story. Even though it's a fictional tale, it touches on something very real, how easily children imitate the actions of adults. Kids are like sponges. They absorb everything they see, but they don't always understand the full picture. In this story, Alex mimicked something dangerous without knowing the consequences, and that's a reality for many families. It's a reminder for all of us, whether you're a parent, guardian, or just someone who has young ones in your life, to be mindful of what we do and say around them. Kids are always watching, and sometimes they repeat behaviors that could lead to serious consequences. Early education and honest conversations with our children are key. We have to guide them, not just by telling them what's right or wrong, but by showing it through our own actions. What did you think of the story? Have you ever seen kids imitate something they didn't understand? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about how we can all do better in helping the next generation grow up safely. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.